This is going to be a very beginner-friendly guide to playing Fury Warrior in patch 11.0.5. Hello, my name is Javier. If you are new here, I do every single spec for beginners in World of Warcraft, making the game accessible to you. So, playing as a Fury Warrior is really, really fun. There's a few things we do need to talk about first. One, we actually hold two-handed weapons. So obviously we have two hands, and usually that would mean that we can only handle one two-hander. As a Fury Warrior, you actually have a two-handed weapon in each hand because you're just that strong. Regarding the stats that we have, a higher eye level equals more strength and therefore more damage. I wouldn't worry too much as a beginner about the secondary stats. If you care enough, you should be simulating your character anyway. And if you don't know what that means, then you're probably too much of a beginner to care. One that is really important to talk about is our Mastery, Unshackled Fury. Increases the damage done while enraged. The more Mastery we have, the more damage we deal while enraged. There's a few different ways that we can get enraged. One of them, especially as we go into combat, is going to be Rampage. As you can see in the tooltip, it says it enrages you and then does blah, blah, blah. Okay, so speaking of that then, how are we going to do the rotation? Well, as we actually go into battle, there's a few things we need to do first. Down here, we have Berserker Stance. This is the main stance you will be in as a warrior in Fury most of the time. Now, one thing to note is that we do have Defensive Stance, and you can click into this at any time you like, in or out of combat. Defensive Stance reduces damage you take and reduces damage you deal. So generally then it's obvious that we're going to be in Berserker Stance, which is our aggressive stance, increasing the damage of our attacks and reducing duration of fear, etc. on us. If you do know there's a large amount of damage incoming, you can swap into Defensive Stance temporarily to try and mitigate some of that damage. But always remember to go back into Berserker Stance. 2 out of 3 is going to be Battle Shout. Use this before you go into combat. If you're going into a dungeon or a raid, you know, when you're eating and doing those things and preparing, you can use Battle Shout to actually empower everyone in your raid or party and increase their attack power by 5% for an hour. Cool. So now we're ready to go into combat. We're going to use Charge. Charge to an enemy, dealing damage and rooting them, and generating 20 rage. What is rage, you may ask? Well, that's this red bar that I have on my weak aura here. More on the weak aura, etc. later. But as you can see, as we're auto-attacking as well, we're generating more and more rage. Some abilities, like our auto-attacks, will generate rage, and then a lot of our abilities are actually going to spend rage. It's the main resource you have as a warrior. So I think that covers everything in the introduction. One thing I do want to say, if this guide is helpful to you, please do click that subscribe button, as it really helps support me as a creator. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on Fury Warriors at the moment down below in the comments, and leave a thumbs up if you like this video. So now that we're in combat, let's actually go through the rotation. I've added these 2 action bars to my screen here as a visual guide for you. On the left is the top priority, and on the right is the bottom or lowest priority. We're starting off with a single target rotation, and later we're going to move on to a Mythic Plus or AoE rotation. Another thing I want to mention is that we are in the Slayer hero talents for single target and multiple target, and I'll put the talent builds in the description. So then, when we go into battle and we've charged in, what are we going to use first? Well, to start with, we're going to use Recklessness. This and our avatar cooldown are both on a 1.5 minute cooldown, so you should use these together. Use Recklessness, going berserk, increasing all rage regeneration by 100% and granting your abilities an increased critical strike chance so that we can do double damage. That is a no-brainer on why we'd want to use that before doing our main rotation. Avatar also turns us into a big daddy Colossus, causing us to deal improved damage as well. So we're going to use both of those, and then we're going to immediately enrage ourselves if enrage is not active. And at this point, it will not be when you go into combat. So we're then going to use Rampage to automatically enrage ourselves. Enrages you and unleashes a series of 4 brutal strikes, and empowering your next Bloodthirst and Raging Blow. So let's talk about the abilities that it's enraging. Can you see here that you have Raging Blow and Bloodthirst? Well, when I use Rampage, it then turns into Crushing Blow and Bloodbath. Crushing Blow is from Raging Blow, Bloodbath is from Bloodthirst. It's really important to note that. So use Rampage at this point to get enraged. It does cost 80 rage to use. And while we're enraged, we then want to use Champion's Spear. This again is on a 1.5 minute cooldown, so you could pretty much use it simultaneously with Avatar and Recklessness. You just have pressing the Rampage button in the middle. So we use our Champion's Spear. You can see that I can actually cast it, wherever I like. And you can see here it's going to cause this spear to appear and chains the nearby targets. Throws the spear at the target location, dealing damage instantly and an additional amount over 6 seconds. Amazing. After that, we want to use our execute ability, but only at specific times. And that's actually partly because we can only use it at specific times. Attempt to finish off a wounded foe, causing physical damage, but you can only use it on enemies with 20% health or lower. We want to use it here at this point in the priority list for 2 reasons. One of the reasons is our Slayer's dominance in our hero talent. Your attacks against your primary target have a chance to overwhelm their defenses and trigger a Slayer's Strike, dealing damage and applying Marked for Execution. Marked for Execution will increase the damage they take from your next execute by 15%. So this is going to be happening passively, and we're going to get this buff on our target called Marked for Execution, and it can stack up to 3 times. Each of those 3 stacks will increase the execute damage by 15, 30, and 45%. Now, I'm just using some abilities, and basically it's going to happen passively. And here it is. Can you see on the target Marked for Execution? Execute damage, critical strike chance, and critical strike damage is increased by 15%. Now remember that this also can stack to 3. So now it's going to be 45%. We're only using Execute at this part in the priority list if we have 3 stacks of Marked for Execution. But there is another reason. You may notice when I use Execute, we suddenly have this buff. This over here is called Ashen Juggernaut. Our critical strike chance is increased by 10%, and that will be applied by your Execute. And that is over here in the talents. Execute increases the critical strike chance of Execute by 10% for 15 seconds, and it can stack up to 5 times. So we're only going to use Execute when we have 3 stacks of Marked Execution or to refresh the Ashen Juggernaut buff. I know that sounds a bit overwhelming, but don't worry, I'm going to be going through the rotation multiple times and putting it all together so that you fully understand it. Then we have Blade Storm. Basically, we whirl around doing a ton of damage. Now, this is going to actually attack anyone in the local area. And you may be thinking, but this is the single target rotation. Why do we care about doing an AoE attack like this in single target rotation? Well, firstly, we want to do it while enraged. And secondly, the hero talents actually do a lot with Blade Storm. We have Imminent Demise here. Every 3 Slayer strikes gives you sudden death. Sudden death is actually from over here. I'm going to explain that in a minute. Using sudden death accelerates your next Blade Storm, striking an additional time. And Blade Storm's total duration is unchanged, meaning it attacks more in the same time. So that improves our Blade Storm. Each strike of Blade Storm applies Overwhelmed to all enemies, increasing damage you deal to them by a percentage for 20 seconds up to 10 stacks. So therefore, Blade Storm also increases how much damage we do. We also have Unrelenting Onslaught. When you execute a target that you've marked for execution, you both reduce the cooldown of Blade Storm, woohoo, and apply 2 more stacks of Overwhelmed to the target per stack of marked for execution consumed, which again is increasing how much damage we do to them, basically. So and we can now use Pummel or Stormbolt while Blade Storming. So there's a lot of improvements to Blade Storm in the Slayer hero talents. So let's just recap before we go any further. We're going to use Recklessness, Avatar, and then go into our Enrage. We're using Rampage. Shove down our Champion's Spear. We're only going to use Execute to refresh Ashen Juggernaut, or when we've got 3 stacks of Marked for Execution. After that, while Enraged, we're going to use our Blade Storm. And then we have our our Raging Blow, and our Bloodthirst. And you may notice they are both here on the rotation, and then they are here and here again. So the first time you see them, I only want you to use them basically when they are empowered. So when you see them as the Crushing Blow or Blood Bath. Okay? So Raging Blow, which turns into Crushing Blow, this is a mighty blow with both weapons that deals damage and has a chance to instantly reset its own cooldown. Use it whenever you see it here as Crushing Blow, okay? Not Raging Blow, but its empowered version, which is Crushing Blow. And then we'll have Blood Bath here. Only use this if you're under 100 rage. And that's, again, not as Bloodthirst, but as Blood Bath. This generates 10 rage and assaults the target in a bloodthirsty craze. Well, actually, no. Oh my god, go away. Assault the target in a bloodthirsty craze, dealing damage and restoring 3% of your health and generating 10 rage. After that, we're going to use Raging Blow if we have under 100 rage. And Opportunist is not active. So what is Opportunist? So when we use our Raging Blow, then you can see here on Opportunist in our hero talents, when Raging Blow resets its own cooldown, because remember sometimes it can, your next Raging Blow deals more damage and an additional amount of critical strike. Okay? After that, we're just going to use Rampage, whether or not we're enraged or not. This is a priority list, remember, not a rotation. After that, we're just going to use Execute whenever we possibly can. After that, we can use our Bloodthirst. And then we're going to use Slam here if we have nothing else to press. So again, Recklessness, Avatar, and then get enraged with Rampage. Use your Champion Spear. Use your Execute if you have 3 stacks of marked for execution. Or to refresh our Ashen Juggernaut buff. Then we're going to use Blade Storm pretty much on cooldown. We're going to use Crushing Blow and Bloodbath at under 100 rage if we can, which we don't have, okay? Because it's not the empowered versions from Rampage now. Use Raging Blow here, just de facto, pretty much. And then there we go. There's a free one of it, as you can see. And then we're going to use Rampage whenever we can. Use Execute with just 1 or more stacks of marked of execution, or whenever you can use Execute. And then we're going to use our Bloodthirst, and then literally Slam if we have nothing else to press. So what you shouldn't be doing, you shouldn't be going left all the way right, and then left all the way right. You should be going down, but then back up the priority list. So you're sort of weaving down, but then going back up. Because this here is your top priority, and this is your bottom priority. So sometimes you may not even get to the very bottom to use Slam for a while, because you may end up just keep working your way back up. But that is basically the single target rotation. If we go into talents, we're now going to go into the Mythic Plus and AoE rotation. And by the way, if this is confusing, then just watch the rotation part of this guide, multiple times if you need to, until it sinks in. I wouldn't worry about going through the talents, etc., until you're comfortable with that. But now let's go through the changes we're going to make. We've got to wait there. The changes we're going to make for the AoE rotation. Now, it's not a big change. Although you're seeing a lot of talents changing here, don't be overwhelmed by this, okay? So we're pretty much doing nearly the same thing, just a bit differently. So 1, Recklessness, Avatar, and Thunderous Roar we now have are the cooldowns you're going to use there. Roar explosively, dealing damage to all enemies within 12 yards and cause them to bleed for a load of damage over 10 seconds. After that, we're going to use our Blade Storm. It's also on a 1.5 minute cooldown. It's going to tie up really nicely with these. And then after that, we should be using, at the end of our Avatar buff, we should be using Odin's Fury. Unleashes your power, dealing damage to an additional amount over 4 seconds, again to all enemies within 12 yards. After that, we're going to use Whirlwind, and specifically only to actually proc a buff, and that is on our improved Whirlwind here. Whirlwind causes your next 4 single target attacks to strike up to an additional 4 targets. Meaning our single target attacks will also actually hit other targets, which is fantastic for AoE. Whirlwind generates free rage an additional amount per target hit. And that is why we're going to use Whirlwind to get the Whirlwind buff up. Okay, you can see it down here. Whirlwind. Only use Whirlwind here to refresh that buff so that our single target attacks actually now hit multiple targets. Again, we're using Execute to refresh Ashen Juggernaut. Here, again, we're only using the empowered versions. So pretty much your Bloodbath or Crushing Blow. We're going to use Rampage here. And then again, Execute whenever we can. And then Bloodthirst or Bloodbath. And, Crushing Blow or Raging Blow. And literally, if you've got nothing else to press, then we use Whirlwind. So again, use your cooldowns pretty much. Including Bladestorm and then Odin's Fury. Use Whirlwind to get the buff up. Use Execute to refresh the buff whenever you can. Use your Crushing Blow and Bloodbath whenever they proc. Rampage. Execute then whenever you can. Bloodbath or Bloodthirst. Crushing Blow or Raging Blow at that point, and then Whirlwind if you've got nothing else to press. And that is the differences in the AoE rotations. You can see there's a few slight changes, but really it's pretty much the same build. Now let's talk over some of the other talents. We've already spoke about the Slayer talents, but there are a few other talents that I think are important that you need to know about. So let's talk about our actual Enrage. Enrage increases the damage your abilities deal by an additional amount, and its duration is increased. That's why we love going into our Enrage. And again, while you're enraged, your Raging Blow will deal more damage. While enraged, your auto attacks can no longer miss, which is great. And this is a really important one. Mastery is increased by 2%, basically meaning doing more damage when enraged. And if you are enraged, Bloodthirst will actually extend your enrage by a second, which is really useful for keeping yourself enraged. There's also Unhinged. I don't think we spoke about this already, but we might have done. Every other Bladestorm, you automatically cast a Bloodbath at your target or a nearby random enemy. I feel like I spoke about that, but I'm not sure. There's this one as well, Reckless Abandon. Recklessness generates 50 rage and empowers your next Bloodbath. Oh my god. Bloodthirst and Raging Blow as well. And there's also the fact that, which I probably should have mentioned earlier, is Titanic Rage. Odin's Fury enrages you. So if you're thinking, hang on, Rampage is down here, etc., when we're going into combat, Odin's Fury is going to enrage you as well. So don't worry about that when you first go in. You have got that covered. Deals increased damage and grants you 4 stacks of Whirlwind as well. So one thing to note, don't just go in with Odin's Fury and think, oh, now I need to put on my sorry, I had a sneezing fit in the background there. I was trying to hold that in for a few seconds. Don't go, oh, Odin's Fury. Oh, now I need to immediately get Whirlwind out for the stacks, because Odin's Fury already does it. As soon as it falls off, then reapply it with the actual Whirlwind itself. So hopefully that makes sense. And those are all kind of the main talents that actually do something. The rest in the spec tree really are just saying this talent does more damage, blah blah blah. Regarding some utilities and cooldowns you may be using, we've spoken about your charge, we've spoken about your berserker stance, your defensive stance, etc. Hamstring is really great in a Mythic Plus environment. Generally, it reduces your target's movement speed by 50%, so half. You can Heroic Leap to leap to a new destination, doing damage. That can be really good at getting out of the fire, etc. Impending Victory on a 25-second cooldown. Instantly attack your target, but also healing you for 30% of your health. Pummel, very important, okay? I want to really, really hammer this into your mind, I guess. Pummel interrupts spellcasting in your enemy on a 15-second cooldown. I think the biggest mistake I would say beginners make, and even seasoned players, is not interrupting spellcasting on your enemy. Interrupting their spells is so important, and in Mythic Plus, the number one way to annoy your healer, your tank, end up wiping your group is not interrupting enough. This can be a really it can be live or die with not interrupting. I really want to hammer that into you. Obviously we want to do as much damage as possible, but interrupting is so important, and it's the number one. I think if you asked any WoW player what is the most annoying thing that other players do, it's not interrupting enough. So just FYI. on that one. Rallying Cry grants you and your party members temporary health. There's a few others in here. You've got Stormbolt, Shockwave, things like that. We've got Enraged Regen, reducing damage you take, and Bloodthirst restores an additional amount of health. That's pretty all of them, actually. But I think it's really, really useful. While I've given you the build in here, don't touch any of this build. But over here, a lot of the actual warrior tree on the left is often utility. And, there may be things that you can swap and change in here that may be useful in different scenarios. And I would just go through these kind of when you are more used to the spec, basically. But I don't want to overwhelm you with that. That pretty much is all of it. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Again, if it was, please do subscribe. I actually do every spec, and I do it every single season, straight away as the season starts. If you like my UI here, you can get this on my Patreon. This is my details profile, my whole Elf UI profile. The UI is completely custom made by me. You can get it on my Patreon, and I can help you install it as well. We also have a VIP channel and Discord where we can answer any of your questions, should you need any help on any spec in the game. And I can even review things like logs, etc., should you need them. This little weak aura in the center of the screen here is Luxfos Warrior weak aura. I find this very useful as well, should you wish to get that. Check out the playlist on screen if you'd like to see other specs. And again, please do subscribe. Let me know your comments in the box below.